Well reflected, all members were present except Mr. Collins, who certainly earned the opportunity to miss. All right. Recognition of teachers. Completing Reading Academy. Sorry, I didn't read the rest of that.
Good evening. I want to introduce Jessica Ackerman. She is our cohort leader for our reading academies that have been going on for the past year with our kinder, first, and second grade teachers. And it's quite an accomplishment of what these teachers have completed during this school year in regards to the reading academies and understanding foundational reading. So I'm not going to steal the thunder from Jessica and let her share with you what's been going on.
Hello. So just a little background information. House Bill 3 was passed in 2019, and it required all of our K-3 teachers and principals to complete the Texas Reading Academies before the 2022-2023 school year. The goal of the Reading Academies is to increase teacher knowledge and implementation of evidence-based practices to positively impact student literacy achievement. This was a huge undertaking. They had to complete 60 content hours, and we actually were together for almost 70 hours. They completed pre and post tests, checks for understanding, and 5 artifacts, one of which was a recorded video they had to submit of a lesson and a written summative artifact. So participants learned and implemented literacy practices that were grounded in the science of teaching reading. And so I want to recognize our 40 participants for their hard work, their excitement going through it, their positive attitude. And I wasn't able to have all 40 come there with their families, but I did want to make sure that you could see their faces and put a name with a face. So our 40 participants included our K-2 teachers, kindergarten Marie Cloud, Brittany Buis, Jenny Lofton, Cheryl Nicholson, Rebecca Harper, Kate Lieber, Tanya Malott, Madison Murphy, Sarah Robertson, and Melanie Porter. Our first grade teachers included Ashley Papania, Courtney Anderson, Stephanie Metters, Sarah Moody, Cindy Balmer, Diane Frame, Kristen Arnold, Shelley Lander, Lynn Shambaugh, Jana Poole. Our second grade teachers included Courtney Alford, Lane Collins, Amelia Carlson, Jennifer Finnegan, Kate O'Donnell, Caroline DeLemba, Mackenzie Grant, Carolyn Hicks, Carla Parker, and Jennifer Agee. Our special education teachers that completed were Alexandra Hodgkinson, Elizabeth Winger, Amy Matucci, and Grace Tabolka. We had our 2 elementary principals, Wendy Kraft and Holly Haynes, attend and complete, along with our assistant principals, Megan Rollins and Angie George. And then we also had our ARLA content coordinator, Jackie Wolford, and our director of secondary instruction and assessment and accountability, Mary Mullen, complete. So I just wanted to recognize them today for their hard work and their accomplishment. This was a huge undertaking, and they did so good. And not only through the learning of the content, but also through implementation in our classroom. So.
And I want to personally thank Jessica for the work that she's done in leading this. The feedback that we received from our teachers has just been overwhelmingly positive. And I've heard many times, oh, I'm taking that new learning and I'm applying it back in my classroom. So that was the purpose of that. So I just want to thank Jessica for the work she has done in leading this. We're very fortunate to have her.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
All right. There are no public comments tonight. Is that correct? Perfect. Item 7 and 9 is the 2022-2023 master schedule presentation.
Yes, and I'd like to ask to come up. They're here tonight to share this presentation. As you know, we've been providing updates and reports on what we've been doing with our master schedule process here. We started this back in November, and are getting very close to finalizing some of the decisions that will be put in place for the 22-23 school year. And it's also assisting us right now in the work of staffing and scheduling of our students in the courses. So I've asked each principal to just give you an overview of what they are going to be shifting on their campus. Again, the process will begin in 2020 and November of 21. We've been involving several stakeholders in this, and as again what we've been providing, it's been course offerings, student enrollment numbers, resources, and staffing considerations. So we're going to kick off tonight with Lovejoy High School.
Good evening. My name is Chris Mayfield, and I have the honor of serving as principal of Lovejoy High School. A couple of things that we have been working through and continue to work on are, even through the course registration process, is really looking around the efficiency component. One of the things that's up there that we talk about is looking at how could we keep the student experience the same, but maybe do it a little bit differently. And so an example would be currently we offer both AP Physics C and AP Physics 2. The difference between the two is AP Physics C is a calculus-based physics course. AP Physics 2 is really the same content, only it's through algebra. By simply offering the AP Physics 2 option, we can increase, kids are going to still get the second AP Physics course, but we can do it in a way that's more efficient by combining the numbers on those classes and save ourselves some that way. We've also looked at creating math labs, and we'll be doing this. We'll keep the double block for those students who have a really diagnosed specific need, but also we're going to increase or begin using math labs in a way that really, if you could think about it in the way of splitting those two classes. And so instead of having a double block where maybe third and fourth period together is their math class, maybe they have it third and then maybe they have a math lab seventh period. Well, what that does, as you can imagine, is it will free up in the scheduling process and allow us to be more efficient because you're not blocking kids out for 2 consecutive periods, which really helps when you're scheduling things like orchestra and band and any of our fine art pieces. And so we believe that that's going to be a great way to support our students, to give them what they need in a little different. And I personally was not a strong math student in school, and I know if you had put me in 90 minutes of math, that would have been a challenge for you as a teacher. And I do think that will help our kiddos to have those pieces split up to give them a break as well. So I think there's a lot of good things with that. And then we're also looking at, can we provide that same high level of support with students in a reading and writing lab, which we have not done. The CAT has served that process or that support level for kids, and it has done okay, but obviously if we can maybe eliminate some of those pieces and at the same time add in the English part, which will help that expertise piece with our kids, I think we're going to see some very positive gains in that. We've also looked at, and we've done some work with the Rti process and looking at how we can support kids and do some remediation during the day. We're looking at, we've got a couple of different options on the table, but regardless of which way we go, what we're going to be doing is creating about a 25 to 30 minute block of time during the school day, not extending the day in either side, but really working to recreate some time in there where we can provide specific remediation, both for our House Bill 4545 students, as well as kids who are busy before and after school, and tutoring is just a difficult thing for them. And so it really says, hey, we've got them during this amount of time. We've looked at doing that, either having an alternate day schedule where maybe every Wednesday we follow that schedule. We've also looked at some different ways with lunch to go back to 3 lunches, which we had prior to COVID, and we expanded to 4 really to minimize the congestion in the cafeteria. But we'll look back at that and see if that would actually fit us. But we're just really looking at ways we can better support students who need that intentional remediation time. And then obviously on the athletic end, we're working closely with our athletic department to figure out, okay, how do we get coaches on the campus that they coach on to eliminate those inefficiencies as well. Yeah.
Programs like AP Physics C are we talking about eliminating as an option?
Yeah.
And
So
is that a concern?
So really looking at some low enrollment places, but we wouldn't, so I'll give you another one might be in, and I hate to say this because I haven't had this conversation with teacher, but we've talked about AP Music Theory, which typically has only about 15 students in it. That wouldn't be the only loss for kids who want to take an advanced piece in fine arts. Still have, we offer advanced placement in the visual arts, and in the performing arts we actually have courses, advanced courses that kids could take in there. So it might look a little different, but we're not denying those kids, wouldn't be denying those kids an opportunity.
Could there be possible, I don't know if there's other dual credit opportunities at other campuses to fill those gaps that we can, I'm leery a little bit of taking away some of these higher level offerings. If, I mean, I'm assuming there's a reason that people would choose the example that you put out, the AP
Yes.
Physics C versus 2, if they had an engineering track as an example, or something that I just want to see if we have opportunities. I understand needing the efficiencies, but if there's opportunities to fill those gaps, if there's gaps that are created, I want to make sure we're thinking about that.
And that course, you're right, on the AP Physics C side with the calculus, but even that course typically trends to a small number of kids, because really, if you think about it, they have to have had calculus in their junior year in order, you have to have already had calculus in order to take that. So it's a,
We can
Yeah.
point these families to that might be affected, just being proactive.
for sure. Yes, ma'am.
You and everyone that's working to find ways to be different and do this. So I'm curious, and I love the idea of the labs. So, and this is just me thinking, I don't know, I want to know what y'all know. Is there any proven data that the kids will succeed and be better by having that math at second period and then the lab at 7th, as far as like retention? Because you're walking away from it, doing other things and then coming back. Do you guys know, is there anything on that?
Honestly, I haven't dug deeply into that. What I do know is that when we do some things around pre-teaching for kids, and when we do some things that are really tied to giving them skills to help them be successful in that second math period, what we're really doing is setting them up for success. As far as the retention piece, I don't know that, but I do know what the research says about those practices and how it supports and helps kids.
Maybe that's because 90 minutes of something is a lot, especially if it's already hard for you. So kudos
Right.
to thinking of a different way to get them what they need, but yet maybe make it more efficient and all that. So
And the plan is also to kind of counsel kids through this. So it's not just we're putting it out there for kids just to, if they want to take an easier route, that's not the intention. We'll be very selective about the kids that we are that need that.
Absolutely.
Ask this question, but when you're talking about master schedules and we're talking about lunch,
Yes.
have we talked about off campus, on campus, any of that? Is that a consideration?
We have looked at that as a model. Obviously, there's some more work that would have to be done if we're going to move to that. But yes, we've actually looked at that as a way to utilize the time better. We'd have to extend the lunch period so that safely kids can get on and off campus. But at the same time, there is I'd actually do have a model drawn up where it would look at a 45-minute lunch and almost like a class period. You build in an additional class period and allow lunch to happen in that way. Kids would have one of two options for lunch, like 4th or 5th period, but it would allow that off-campus piece. But we just started there, and then we'll have to do some conversation about off-campus.
Be behind that, and I think we talked a little bit at strategic planning, how post-COVID, pre-COVID, the stress level of kids, and I don't know if that's a consideration to give them a little margin in their lives. And I don't know the theory behind why we do or do not do that. I just didn't know if we were thinking about it.
It's really student safety. 30 minutes is not enough time to have a large group of kids exit. Then we're late, we're standing in line behind. I mean, if you think about the location of where the
Got
high
it.
school is,
Mhm.
and now we're speeding, trying to get back to school, and it's a safety piece. It has
Got
been. But extending the lunch period could help alleviate some of that. All right.
Mr. Coder?
Good evening, board. My name is Chris Coder. I'm the principal at Willow Springs. Excited to talk to you all today about some of the things that we're doing master schedule wise at Willow. One of the things that we are doing is we are creating and implementing a program called Leopard Time. Basically, Leopard Time is an opportunity in the middle of the day for students to have voice and choice over what they do with that time. So students will go first, second, third, fourth period, and then every staff member and every student will transition into Leopard Time, where they'll spend an hour eating and doing something either academic or social, followed up by, after that hour, they'll go into fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth period. So kind of exactly what you were talking about a moment ago, Amy, with that sort of break in the day. But they have some choice over what they do during that time. And like I said, there is academic and social opportunities during that time. Also, we are looking very closely at how we're going to address House Bill 4545. We have created reading strategies and math strategies classes. Of course, that's going to be a tier 3 type of approach to making sure that our students receive the intervention that they need so that they can be successful on that test the following year. Lastly, we've talked a lot about athletics and how we can manage our athletics courses. We created a strength and conditioning course so that instead of having all of our students in the athletics periods at one time, first and eighth period, those courses get incredibly overloaded. And so what we're doing is we're providing the strength and conditioning course so that kids can take that course during the middle of the day. So that if a kid is not a football kid, they're a basketball only kid, they can actually go into strength and conditioning, which maybe is third period, you know, and then when they're ready to try out for basketball, they can try out for basketball. We'll do a schedule change, put them in that basketball athletics course, and then they will, you know, be in the athletics course at that time. And that's it. Yes, ma'am.
Can you give us like an example of what the student choice would be? Like,
Yeah, that's a great question. I can give a lot of examples. Pretty passionate about this, so I'll try to keep it short. But some things that they can do is they can go to tutoring. This is a really cool opportunity, especially for our coaches who normally are tied up during the beginning or the end of the day, because now our coaches can tutor their own kids. They also can choose to go to clubs. We'll have a wide variety of clubs, anywhere from, you know, rock painting club to, you know, friendship bracelet club to, you know, you think of it and we'll have a club for it. Also, kids will have the opportunity, if their grades are up and if their behavior is appropriate, then they'll have the opportunity to do things like open gym, go outside, things like that. But that's the key, is making sure that their grades are up and that their behavior is appropriate, because if those two things aren't in line, then they will lose some of those opportunities that they'll have during the day to participate in some of the fun things. So this will not only hopefully increase grades through the academic aspect of it, increase positive behavior through, you know, yes, that desire to make sure that they're doing their thing. But also our hope is that it'll also increase attendance as well, because this will likely be a highlight of the day for most students. And so we're hoping that that will help increase that attendance piece as well. Well, my committee is currently talking about how that's going to be implemented. We've talked about a 3-day option, a 4-day option, and a 5-day option. Yep, we're still in the middle of that planning as of right now, but we are getting closer and closer every day to determining what that's going to look like. Thank you.
Good evening, Courtney Halpin at my most favorite school in Lovejoy, which is Sloan Creek. I'm not biased at all. Okay, so as far as changes, we are doing a pretty big shift from moving from an 8-block schedule to a 5-block schedule. What this does is this allows every content area to be an equal 70 minutes. This allows some flexibility in how we schedule, and it also allowed us to build in 30 minutes of intervention. And like Mr. Coder said, that intervention can be for a wide variety of things. We'll offer clubs and activities, and we'll also offer our House Bill 45 45 intervention. So each student will have a unique schedule throughout the week. They may attend tutoring a couple of days, and then they may have 3 days of activities and clubs. So it'll be a good segue to start our kids before they move over to Willow and have that flexibility at lunch, which I think lends itself really nicely as they are transitioning from Sloan Creek over to Willow. Also for our specials in fine arts, a great thing that we're doing with it being a 70-minute block, there's a great opportunity to split one of the blocks and have 35 minutes of PE or STEM and then their fine art. So fifth graders, I'm really excited. They'll have art and music every week starting next year. They will also have the opportunity for STEM and also some guidance lessons. We've seen a big shift with these kids that were in elementary that they could use some more of that social emotional learning. And so we're really excited to build that into their schedule. And then for sixth grade, same thing. They will have PE for that first part or STEM, and then they'll go into their fine arts. And I know there's some consideration in opening our second gym, and that will lend really nicely if that happens, because PE and health, we are integrating those together. So recently, or I guess this year I should say, and in the past, health and PE have been separate. So kids would do PE some of the time, and then they would transition to a classroom for health. If we're able to integrate those two things together, there's no transition time anymore. So it gives them more physical activity. We can build in those health components, and it integrates really nicely without having that transition time. We really want to make the most of the physical activity and building in the health, because we know that it's already hard on our students when they go from having these amazing playgrounds in elementary and then coming to Sloan Creek and not having as much of that. So we think this will be a great way to do that. Also, we kind of talked about the intervention clubs, but that 30 minutes of intervention is built in every day. And the great thing about it is every teacher, both fifth and sixth, have intervention at the same time. This allows us a lot of flexibility in how we use our teachers and how we use our support systems to make sure that we fill any gaps for our kiddos that may need that. And then also our GT restructure. We really looked at how could we be more efficient with our GT teachers. And so looking at our numbers for next year, we were able to combine. So we'll have one GT teacher for Arla. So that teacher will teach both fifth and sixth grade. And then we will have one GT teacher for social studies that will teach fifth and sixth grade. So we really looked at those numbers. They were a little less than our math and science GT numbers. So they're still getting awesome programming, but just not as many teachers. So we think that's going to be a great move for our kids. Questions?
Training time look like for teachers? How does that change from what it was?
That is a great question. So really that is a bit of a shift, because typically our teachers had 90 minutes of planning. But what we realized is for our science and social studies teachers that wasn't always combined, because they had single block classes, whereas our Arla and math had double block. So now they'll still get a 70-minute planning period, but they'll also have that intervention time where they can do a lot of work with kids. So I'm gaining time back because we won't have tutoring after school. So I'm excited to give that time back to them. Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Kraft is going to come up and she's going to speak for Puster and Hart. Mrs. Haynes was not able to join us tonight, but their schedules are basically identical. So she's going to speak to that.
Good evening. We're excited to talk to you about our master schedule. First of all, we're really excited because this is the earliest that we've even had like a draft of our master schedule. So Holly and I are really pumped and excited about that. But we are going to implement a Leopard Time. We're going to call it Leopard Time. This year we had it as Flex Time. We're going to do it a little bit differently next year than what we did it this year. It's been highly successful on our campuses where it's just a 30-minute time for our teachers to really work with students and share students and things like that. But next year what we're going to do is we're going to have it all in one time. And the reason we're going to shift to that model is because that allows us to share kiddos across grade level. It also allows us to have more people people on deck to help with kids and really widen that. So our library media specialist is going to be able to help, our counselor. So everybody kind of all hands on deck for that 30 minutes every single day. Through that time, we'll do some interventions and enrichment opportunities, but then we'll also be working on our House Bill 4545. Something else we're really excited about is we're also going to incorporate some social skills time. We notice that's really a deficit in our students right now. And so we're really going to do some, just good kind of old fashioned, like, hey, this is how you play a game. Here's how you take turns. Here's how you do those kind of skills that they need, just because we've noticed that as a gap. We are very, very excited that we have a full-time coach on our campus, which allows us to start our specials earlier, which is going to allow us to have 60-minute planning times for our teachers, which to an elementary teacher is heaven. The most we've ever had as a district is 45 to 50 minutes. This year they have 45, but by the time they go to the bathroom, it's really 40 minutes. And so we're really, really excited about having a 60-minute planning period about that. Another plus to our special schedules is that we have 5-minute increments in between, which gives our specials teacher an opportunity to kind of reset. And especially like our art teacher, you're teaching kindergarten, and you might be teaching 4th grade. Well, they need different materials and things like that. So that 5 minutes allows them to reset and kind of get their room ready to go for the next class of time. During our 60-minute collaborative planning time, our teachers are going to be really reviewing data. We're really going to dig into that data and really look at planning our flex groups and our small groups, and have a really big focus on what that small group instruction looks like, and really collaboratively planning that this year, which is also another shift and celebration that we're excited about. And then I think of everything that we've done, I think I'm most proud of this is that we are really looking at a model of where our special education schedule is really driving our whole master schedule. So used to kind of in our past, we would have, here's the master schedule, and then special education teachers would go and plug in everything. So this year, what we're doing is we're looking at the whole master schedule, and we're looking at our student schedules, and then we're saying, okay, here is the 2nd grade inclusion block. Here's the 2nd grade resource block. And by doing that, then our general education teachers are going to plan their instruction around that. And so it's just really, number one, it gives us an efficiency in services, but it really ensures that our special education students get their expert teachers, their gen ed teachers, to provide some essential learning for them and intervention for them too. So it's a win-win for us. And I think that's it that we're doing. Any questions for us? Yes, ma'am.
General question. It may be for Courtney, but maybe it's for all of you. So I love the branding of the Leopard Time, right? I'm seeing you have it at elementary.
Mhm.
Willow, Courtney, are you calling your intervention block also Leopard Time, maybe the 30-minute? Okay. I'm not telling you what I think you should do. Well, here's my thing. We're all leopards.
Mhm.
And as
Yeah.
we start something and we get to expect and love and enjoy, like
Mhm.
Wendy and Holly are going to have that, and then Chris is going to have it. I didn't know if you wanted to sandwich and like,
Yeah.
it's your call. I just think it's cool, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, because we're so consistent, and I
Yeah.
thought really it was just,
Yeah.
you'd planned it that way.
We got it.
Okay.
Noted.
If you want.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That was cool.
Yeah. Anything else?
This is a little bit of change. Change is not always easy. Or as far as communication, if people have concerns about the change, who should the parents that have concerns about changes with scheduling, they had an experience last year, it's going to be very different the next year, reach out to the principals, how is it going to be communicated? Those are sometimes have no one where to go if they just have questions or concerns.
Absolutely. I would always say starting with the principal is the first step. And sometimes it's really just that opportunity for you to talk to that principal one-on-one and ask some questions and then to see it. Like, I'm a visual person, so I'm kind of like, hey, can I see that on paper? Let me see that on paper. So then when you see it on paper, you're like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. So I would always start with the principal, and just kind of helps.
My implementation committee for our version of Leopard Time is working on a full parent training piece. that's going to go with this. As you mentioned, this is a pretty big change and a pretty big shift in terms of things that we've done. Some really important things that we need parents to understand about what it is and what it isn't, and just the expectations of how parents can help partner with us to make this time the most effective that it can be. So we're going to do a series of videos and some in-person opportunities for parents to come up to Willow and learn about the time. So.
I think what I can speak to as well, I think and I really want to commend the principals for the work that they've been, this is not something that's just happened overnight. There's been a lot of thought, a lot of discussions, talking with teachers, working through this together as a team. But I think what we all kind of came to the consensus with is that we're going to be able to target instruction better than what we've been doing and really differentiate for students at a higher level than we have before. So I don't know if our students are really going to notice the difference too much, but I do think the instruction, we freed up more time to be more targeted with our instruction for our kiddos. So just thank you.
All right. Item 8 tonight is our Financial Sustainability Committee presentation.
Have a few friends for our presentation that I'm excited to have with us. So this evening we wanted to share with you the recommendations of the Financial Sustainability Committee. So as we began this work, Ms. Cordell shared a vision with the committee and at several of our staff meetings that we are doing some important work, and that work is akin to slaying the dragon. And at the beginning, we had a really brutal looking dragon, but recently it has transformed into this nicer dragon. So it's a good metaphor for what we've been working on as a part of this committee. So we're excited to share these recommendations with you. But first wanted to give a little bit of framing around what's being done. So the Financial Sustainability Committee is the subcommittee of the Lovejoy 2030 Strategic Planning Committee that is focused on our pillar of financial sustainability. And so much like the other strategic planning subcommittees, the products that were to come out of this committee included looking at our future ready skills and what strategic targets we needed to create to achieve the pillar of financial sustainability, in addition to the strategies and key indicators we would need to utilize in order to get there and to track our progress. So in developing our budget for next year, obviously this was a big goal of development and one of the big paths that would lead to the progress that's been made to date. And so we kind of go back to our theme for the 2022-23 budget development, which is reframing our story, which I think is so important as we focus on our legacy of excellence and future ready students through the financial sustainability that we're focusing on this evening. And so again, the board helped us develop some budget priorities, which included focusing on rebuilding our fund balance, compensation, attendance, and enrollment, and identified some strategies through which we'd be able to focus on these priorities. And obviously you'll see the Financial Sustainability Committee was a huge part of some of those strategies in order to achieve our priorities. So I did want to share with you just a brief snapshot of the meetings that these fine individuals attended and participated in. We had about 40 different stakeholders that included parents, teachers, staff members, community members, a wonderful array of people who, as you can see, spent a lot of time in the evenings gathering together to talk about a number of topics. We started with kind of a school finance 101 and then did a deep dive into revenue, what drives our revenue and all those components, some benchmarking, looking at our expenditures. And then we really kind of did some deep dives and started to gain their feedback in terms of areas that we could focus on for financial sustainability. And so that work continued. And so we're excited that tonight represents the culmination of that work. We'll have one more meeting tomorrow night to kind of review and celebrate and plan for next year. But that is where we are in terms of this committee. And as part of building this budget, this is kind of the plant that we show. It's really starting to sprout some really good leaves that will help us lead the way to the final implementation of this total budget milestone map that we've been following for some months since November. And so again, excited to introduce to you a couple of our members who will start by sharing with you some general information about the committee, and then we'll dive into the specific recommendations. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Stephanie McGowan and Matthew Dubois.
Hi, board. I'm Stephanie, and I had the honor of serving Matt and I on this committee. And we'll move right here. And I want to begin right in the middle of this slide by drawing your attention to 3 words that I think are the most important. Right there in the middle, it says that our committee would assess and make recommendations. And when you begin any project, I think it's a very good idea to begin with the end in mind. And that is exactly what we were tasked with doing, to assess and make recommendations. And fortunately, I'm going to speak for the group. We were very well informed by this group of people. I consider myself to, at this point, be extremely well informed. So that gave us the opportunity to assess and then make recommendations. And to that point, I would like to say here, moving to this slide, this was a fantastic group of people. The process itself was extremely well designed so that we could come together as a group of volunteers, parents, teachers, administrators, bring our various points of view, perspectives, various expertise. I am very comfortable with the budget, but I would not consider myself the expert on combing through data. However, Julie is excellent at combing through data. And Matt brings something, he brings a business experience. This group of people brought excellent perspective and experience to the table. And then because the system was, the process was so well designed, we were able to walk through and I believe create some very meaningful recommendations.
It says to speak into the mic, so I just want to make sure you can hear me because I'm kind of a quiet person. So if you can't hear me, just let me know. I will say this real quickly. In 15 years here in the district and attended, I can't tell you how many different financial meetings and superintendent's meetings and different meetings in regards to budgets and such. This organizationally, the way that this group to my right, left, and over there organized and executed this process was as impressive as anything I've seen. I love data. I love people, but I also love data. And the way they were able to intermingle the two during this process was remarkable, because not only were we able to take actual, accurate data and discuss it, we were able to implement it and talk about it in ways that individually in these sections, oh, I have a clicker. There you go. In these groups to hopefully affect individual students and all the stakeholders. And so I just want to take a quick second real quick, because each of these areas that we're looking at, these subtopic groups, these were all explained, demonstrated, discussed in these meetings. These weren't things that were punchlines or buzzwords that they threw out there for 5 seconds. These were actual areas that we were tasked with collaborating on, discussing, coming up with thoughts on, and then presenting those thoughts as stakeholders. I'm just going to read a couple of them. I'll skip probably every other one. Enrollment, demographic projections. This is all in revenue growth, revenue grid generation, by the way. Tax rates, capital planning to debt and leverage debt. Now keep in mind, those items were actually presented 15 years, it is so refreshing and awesome to have actual just raw data that they say, here it is, here's the data, and here's what we can do with it. It was awesome. Efficiency measures, we went through each of these different areas in the benchmarking and the debt service plans, program analysis, that these fine educators, I guess, well, they should be home. They've got to get up tomorrow, that they were able to make their own recommendations. These were all rigorously discussed and implemented. So I just want to take that moment and recognize that. If you look at the last slide that we're kind of covering, and then we'll turn it over, take 2 seconds, you'll see the diversity of thought in this slide. You have the PTO involved, you have parents involved, you have educators involved, you have business women involved, you have businessmen involved, you have community stakeholders involved, community members involved. This was, again, as flawlessly executed by the administration and these people as I would have ever imagined for signing up for the time commitment to do this. So that's all I have, and then I'm turning it over to that person.
Wow, thank you. Now you know why they were such an amazing group. So as this group gathered together and dived into the subtopic groups that you saw in columns, those were derived from several exercises that the group did as a whole, and kind of then identified what areas they wanted to focus on. And then this was the product that was shared out as our end goal. So we wanted to identify strategic targets, and then get into strategies and key indicators for each of those. So this is what we call a scorecard, and we use the same process during the strategic planning committee. And so our strategic targets are where we want to go. So they're kind of the big picture vision and trajectory. Our strategies are the actions that we want to take to get to that intended outcome. And then our key indicators are how we'll measure effective implementation of each of those strategies. So we wanted to kind of give you an idea of what the process of building the scorecard looked like. These were some questions that were provided to support the development of strong strategic targets. We wanted to find things that directly supported financial sustainability, that aligned with our strategic planning, had short and long-term impact so that we could consider both of those, that were specific but not limiting, attainable, measurable, and something we could have an impact on. So there was a lot of development around these, and examples were provided as far as non-examples and examples so that we could kind of flex our thinking. So this was provided as an example that we might prioritize revenue generating opportunities, but a strategy non-example might be something as specific as implementing a chili cook-off fundraiser on every campus. While that might be a whole lot of fun, it may not help us get to that long-term intended outcome. So an alternative example may be research and identify additional community-based fundraising opportunities. So as we worked through the development of these strategic scorecards, some of that information was shared so that they could develop their own subtopic group specific committee recommendations. So at this point, I'm going to invite our first group up here, which was revenue generation. And Justin Gertz and Matt Dubois will be sharing the findings from this subtopic group.
Hi, everybody. Justin Gertz, really thankful to be here and had the great fortune of serving on the Financial Sustainability Committee with many other fine folks in here. It was a very humbling experience. I was blown away by, as Matt had mentioned, just the commitment from the administration and the leadership to put the program together, the thought that went into structuring it. It was flawless. And I think what we're going to end up, the end product from the committee is going to be something that's really valuable to the district in terms of getting us back on track. So in regards to the revenue generation focus area, a few strategies that we came up with. Obviously, when you're looking at generating additional revenue, you've got to consider taxes. So considering a voter-approved tax ratification election, a lot goes into determining the feasibility, what makes sense, the process, the timing, what is it that we're asking for. So a lot of work is going to go into that. And then also with anything like that, especially in an environment like this, how we communicate pursuing a TRE is critical to the community. The second strategy, what are some of the things that we can do to offset some of these additional costs that the district is having to take on and fund? Be they donations, how do we boost attendance? Are there additional fees that we need to consider? We want to put together a list of recommendations and then have that in front of everybody before the June budget adoption. And then also, kind of similar to what we did with the committee, is forming a task force made up with multiple different folks from different areas of the district to help try and drive attendance. As everybody in this room already knows, that's a huge, huge way to boost funding, just getting everybody in school. And then the third strategy, Matt, do you want to do this one so you're not just standing there and looking pretty?
See if I can read what Jeff wrote, what Justin wrote down. The third one was basically taking our fundraising and our organizations and all these different entities we have within the district and putting a more unified and understood approach to fundraising within each of them, kind of getting them all basically on the same page. So everyone's kind of working off the same playbook so that you don't have day one, you're getting asked to donate money here, day two, you're asked here, day three, day four, day five. It's much more of a coordinated approach. And as Justin mentioned in the strategy 1.2, putting together another stakeholder committee that will meet quarterly at least to make sure that everyone is on the same page as far as the fundraising efforts, and also making sure that they're keeping each other in check and they're giving ideas of ways that were successful for them or were less successful for them, and allowing them to again boost revenue generation in an organized manner that isn't a burden on the households, in large. I think that's all for revenue.
So I was able to attend one of these meetings, but I didn't get into the details like this. I'm curious about conversations that might have been had around revenue generation when it came to outside partnerships with something we've talked about in the past, corporate partnerships, things like that. Was that a topic of conversation?
Yes.
It didn't make the list here. I'm just curious where that was in your conversations.
Jason, I would say that I'd probably put that in strategy 1.2 as a potential fee donation, something that we can do to help offset some of those costs. But that was something that we covered. But great question. Thank you.
I think there are also some of the other recommendations that might be related to your comment. So for efficiency measures, we have Travis Shull and Anna Cohen. You have questions? Or Travis.
Hello. Since we all know the largest expense in a school district is staffing, we thought we'd start with our strategic target to be that Lovejoy ISD will focus on generating revenue increases in order to, implement staffing efficiencies within the district. So our first strategy is maybe historically there was little consistent and repeatable staffing guidelines. So strategy one is to utilize staffing guidelines to drive staffing decisions and development of master schedules. Again, to come up with the master schedule, to come up with the staffing guidelines, we review the master schedules and determine the alignment with the staffing guidelines. So you establish the staffing guidelines and then determine the alignment with those guidelines. Our strategy two is this gets into the specifics of the guidelines. For instance, review contract days, job descriptions, compensation before filling out the vacant positions. To accomplish this, we recommend establishing and implementing a standard review process that compares the actual staffing and comp to other districts. Our third strategy is to review and establish the master schedule efficiencies for each campus. And this is great timing, right? Since we just heard from all the campuses that have already begun that process. This is them getting into their committees, the TASB staffing report that everyone's seen, and implement those appropriate recommendations that still allows Lovejoy to stay Lovejoy. Some of these recommendations are balancing teacher workload, block scheduling, as we heard, class sizes, registration deadlines, and et cetera. And then finally, to compare the staffing guidelines to the actual results and monitor those on a continuous basis.
Questions for us? About this is it ability for our teachers
It
so
does.
that every year it doesn't feel like what's
We're starting
happening.
over.
Starting over.
Yeah, yeah. Just being very intentional, putting some guidelines in place, following those guidelines so they know, our administrators know, what that expectation is, and that we're going to be consistent with it. So we had a great group to work with that. Some great ideas.
Thank you.
Right. Our next group is program analysis with Rebecca May and Dr. Kim. Hello. So one thing that consistently came up through really every discussion we had every night was programs. Are our programs as efficient and effective as they could be? And we're in a position right now where we really have to evaluate that. And our programs are so important because not only could they possibly impact our finances, they could also impact our legacy of excellence and the fact that are our students future ready or not. So we kind of came up with some questions to start us off. Really, the first was, are we effectively using our community resources? And I think this is going to kind of go with what you were speaking to, Mr. James. And how involved are our students in our programs? When we're involved, we're committed. And we're dedicated to our district. And so how involved are our students in our programs? And then does everyone really have a place in a program somewhere? So we came up with kind of our overarching strategic target of just really evaluating our program efficiency and our program experience for our students. And the first strategy that we came up with was to really hone in on those community resources, research and identify some possible partnerships within our community who could help us get our kids connected, could help us maybe fund some programs to where our students feel like they have a place within our district. Because we have a lot of students who don't have interests that are like everyone else's. They're not into athletics. Maybe they're into horticulture, and we have some parents and community members with some really amazing jobs. And so are we reaching out to them to support those students and maybe partner with us and help us financially, hopefully, but also help us get our kids committed to our district to where they're showing up every day excited to be here.
And speaking to that, I think what we discovered through the Financial Sustainability Committee with bringing community business educators together and also with our Lovejoy 2030 strategic planning, we started making those connections that there were business partnerships out there that we really were not tapping into. So we've gotten the ball rolling on a few of those already. So we're excited about the possibilities and opportunities for our students ahead. So when you think about analysis of programs, we were doing a lot of that this year already. And we did find some efficiencies that we were able to put in place for 22-23 without really compromising the student experience. So as we're moving forward, is it how can we use our planning teams that we already have in place at our district level and campuses as far as how we are looking at strengths. We're looking at data to see what our outcomes are so that we just don't keep doing the same thing. Are we making the adjustments that we need to along the way? So that's really strategy 3.2. And as you'll notice there, the key indicators would be through our district improvement planning team, our campus improvement teams. The Superintendent Teacher Connection Council is also a great opportunity to look at gather feedback and analyze program effectiveness, and then also the Student and Superintendent Council. And then, of course, we are going to be putting in place for the 22-23 school year some teacher pre-K-12 teacher vertical teams that will be looking at programs, instructional programs, as well as other programs. And then strategy 3.3, we really want to look at an evaluation process that we would follow across the board. So are we when we look at our student services programs, whether it's athletics, whether it's fine arts, whether it's robotics, and then also our student achievement, our academic programs. What are we doing? What type of tool are we using so that we can do that on an annual basis? So that hasn't been developed yet, but that is something that we feel like would be important through this. So. Okay.
All right, any questions for that group? I will point out that as a part of the strategic planning committee, we had one student who was a senior who expressed an interest in an area and has already achieved an internship this summer in that field of study. So some of those connections are really kind of really a special opportunity. So thank you for sharing that. For Legacy of Excellence, we have Courtney Claiborne and Aaron Goff and maybe Kevin Parker. No, he says no.
Hi, my name is Courtney Claiborne and this is Erin, and we have been loved on and poured into this district for me 17 years and for Erin 8 years, and we felt like it was so amazing that they asked teachers to be, we're not the only teachers on the committee, but that teachers were asked to be on the committee because it's so important to, and we feel that our voice is being heard, which is amazing, and so thank you for that. Anyway, sidetrack. But we wanted to highlight some ways that aside from money, we feel compensated because we know that this district is doing everything they can to make sure that we do feel that as well. And our district has always supported us. And so we wanted to highlight some of those ways and reasons that we stay here. We stay here because of the amazing community that we are in. We stay here because of who we get to work with. And then we stay here because our district does pour into us and build us up professionally, which doesn't happen everywhere. And so that's what we wanted to highlight through our Legacy of Excellence strategies is how do we retain the best and brightest teachers by building us up with that professional piece. Erin's going to hit some of those.
All right. So our first strategy that we came up with was to identify and build on the passions and strengths of teachers and staff to expand their contributions to the district. And we really felt like that would be able to be attainable through surveys to gauge staff interest and involvement in additional areas, to increase staff input, involvement in planning and delivery of professional development opportunities. And then our second strategy that we came up to retain the best and brightest teachers was to develop a sense of positive culture between staff and the community. So we really wanted those key indicators to be that staff will be recognized within the community, identify their contribution to the organization within campus and district communication, achievements and recognition between staff members to highlight excellence in their work.
And then our last strategy was maintaining that high quality, meaningful training, which we get in the summer and throughout the year, but leading into a constant conversation throughout the school year where we felt like what we were getting in the summer continued all the way out through the year and really focusing on, instead of multiple different things, really honing in on what did we learn in the summer, and now let's connect that throughout the whole year. Some key indicators would be having some quarterly check-ins where you're just touching back on those conversations that we had in the summer so that stayed fresh in the mind all year long. Maybe having that same speaker come back mid-year for our convocation, mid-year convocation, and just again touch on maybe some new challenges to give us, but again that it was connected into that same thing that we heard in the summer. And then give ways where volunteers at the end of the year, we tried to make it where we weren't assigning more things to teachers, but where volunteers could show and share how did they implement the things that we had learned throughout the year into their classroom so that we're learning from our colleagues. And that's all we have. Any questions?
I love the passions and strengths and hearing what you do well and what you love and being able to hone in on that. I love that.
Yeah, I really love that
legacy of excellence is actually centering on teachers, because as we pour into our teachers, so they pour into our kids who then achieve more. And so for me, that's a big key tenet of legacy of excellence. We could have picked a lot of different things, but I think this is a key one. I appreciate that you picked this topic.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So I hope you can see from all of the interest and the engagement and the passion from everybody that was involved in the Financial Sustainability Committee, how much they poured into each of these plans and scorecards and the development from that. So at this point, we can answer any additional questions you may have. We do have one more meeting. So tomorrow evening, we'll kind of celebrate and plan for next year. But I just want to thank especially each and every member, especially those of you that also came this evening. I've only been in Lovejoy for 10 months, but I'll never forget the first meeting that we had and that I was just ready to dive into data because yes, some of us are data nerds, but we're also people. And I was so inspired by the fact that we had 40 community members that shared their story and their why. That they wanted to be a part of rebuilding the financial sustainability in this community because they loved it. And just thank you for rebuilding that love as part of our group. I really appreciate each and every one of you.
Kind of an all-encompassing question around what do you envision this going forward? Who owns these areas? Who's going to have accountability around the indicators? And how do we take other ideas that were maybe not the top priority, but the next level for future years? I mean, just maybe 2 minutes about how does it become implemented and then where do we go from here?
That's an excellent question because once you've developed so much work around something, you want to ensure that it is carried forward. And so part of that work is going to be done tomorrow evening in terms of the committee itself. We will meet next year at some point. We will have some further discussion about how we're doing in those scorecards. And I think Katie's development of that scorecard, the key indicators as well as the strategies, the key indicators are great because they're really going to keep us on point. And because this does feed into the total strategic planning, we will have intermittent reports back to the board and the community in terms of how we're operating compared to those key indicators. And then that's, as part of the strategic plan, will continue to be developed, revised, reviewed. And so I foresee that continuing forward and maybe not, I don't know, how many meetings do we have? It may not be as many meetings as this year, but I could tell you none of us are interested in losing the traction that was gained. And we also realized that while we did create strategies that we felt had short-term ability as well as long-term ability, it will continue to be revised along with the rest of the strategic plan. So I don't know if Katie, you want to add any comments about the rest of the strategic plan?
You nailed it. So this will become part of our strategic plan. And then our strategic plan will drive our district improvement plan and our campus improvement plans in those areas that we are moving forward in the immediate. In terms of accountability and responsibility within our strategic plan, each strategic target and strategy will have a cabinet member assigned to it as the person responsible ultimately for moving it forward. We will have a structure at the campus or at the district level where we are having ongoing conversations about our progress towards those goals. We've committed publicly to an annual update, and then we've also committed to once every 2 years, we're going to do a little bit deeper reflection of the progress we've made, where we're at. Does anything need to be modified or changed? Have we stalled out on anything? And if so, why? Examining that. We'll engage some board members in that and of course report that out publicly as well.
Awesome. Thank you everyone who participated in this. I think it's a lot of really good work, and the passion that everybody presented with and the excitement around it it's cool to see. So I hope everybody's in the community paying attention, and everybody that participated, if they could be advocates and talk about the good work, I think that's awesome too.
I want to echo what Jason said. Many of you lead other segments of things in Lovejoy, and you took the time to say yes to one more thing. So thank you. Thank you to our staff, teachers, cabinet members, everyone. It really for me, helps me feel better about the work I'm doing in this seat when you all take the time to do that kind of work and help us learn more what's important to you guys. So thank you for saying yes, because I know it was a lot, and you're very appreciated. So
Thank you.
I would give is just being able to take a group of citizens, teachers, administrators, and bring them together in a room, working through some complex topics, being able to extract from that solutions that are workable, implementable, trackable, and all of those things. That's also not the easiest thing to orchestrate and do, especially when you're working from 10,000 feet and bringing things into a strategic plan. So this entire process has been done very professionally by both the administration and those participating in it. And so I'm grateful for that. It allows us to achieve our goals and move the ball forward. And it's been very efficient. So thank you again for the time and professionalism in every regard that we've had thus far. We're going to continue. So thank you.
Thank you.
I didn't know if I was gonna.
Power factor correction project presentation. What happened to
So we're
that?
going to shift here a little bit to a operations topic. You may recall we mentioned the concept of power factor correction when we were beginning to discuss our long-range energy plan. So I wanted to bring forward to this board workshop an update on an assessment that we did. So in terms of background, we shared with you earlier that board policy CL requires the district to have a long-range energy plan. We did put that into place. It was adopted on April 25th. So thank you for that. We did identify 2 strategies within that long-range energy plan that this relates to. Strategy number 1 was to track utility cost and usage, and we've been doing that for several months. And as a result of doing that analysis, we discovered that we were incurring power factor penalties. Strategy number 6 in that plan is to explore opportunities for efficiency savings. So that's why we brought this assessment to you. This is just a snip of CL legal policy, which essentially states that the district should evaluate anything that may have a 7-year payback or less in terms of savings. So power factor essentially is a measurement of electrical efficiency, the ratio of real to total power. And so it's not uncommon for large school buildings that may have a lot of inductive motors and things of that nature to have less than ideal power factor. We only have 2 campuses that are on Encore's grid. Those are Puster and Lovejoy High School. And so currently we're fortunate that the other cooperative electricity company that we have in the district does not charge power factor penalties. So that's why we're only talking about these 2 campuses. But typically those school buildings can range from 80 to 98%, and buildings performing below 95% are assessed penalties. They're assessed those penalties because it does cost the transport TDSP companies like Encore more because they have to provide more power to us because of the inefficiency created by the low power factor. So these are just some examples of power factors that are generated from different types of energy using devices. So that can range anywhere from 100% of power factor for incandescent bulbs to, you know, the low end of 70% for a computer, and then all the way down to a lightly loaded motor could be as low as 20%. And so those are kind of some samples there. This is just a snip of the tariff that's in the Encore tariff, allowable tariffs that they charge us and how that ratchet works. And this is a power factor triangle. So this is essentially showing you what this is easier to explain. So some engineers will use a beer and foam illustration because this is a school I prefer to use chips. So essentially you have the kVAR or apparent power available, but only some of that is real power. And so that basically it's the concept is the air in the bag is the inefficient power that you're not using, that yet you're still charged for because it's a component that you're provided. And so essentially what you do to improve your power factor is install capacitor banks that look like the picture you see there. that simply sit in your electrical room, and they're placed in alignment with the motor so that they can affect the power factor so that you're no longer receiving the penalties, you're lowering your power triangle. And so we did have an assessment performed by a company called Ally Energy Solutions. It was a free assessment, and they're available through a cooperative agreement. So they've done a number of school district and university projects throughout the state. And so essentially when they completed the assessment, we had them come out and look at each of the facilities, do an on-site walkthrough. They're estimating the savings from doing a project for power factor correction will be $11,873 a year. And a total cost of $49,500 to install the capacitor banks at the 2 campuses. So essentially that would be a payback of about 4 years. I've worked with several people at this company on past projects, and they kind of call that now the Duplessis TEMA warranty. But essentially they will warranty the equipment for the complete term of the savings to be achieved, which I think is important for school districts who are relying on that savings to be a component of any operational savings. So again, there's a list of districts and universities and other public entities that they've worked with. But we believe this would be an opportunity when we look at efficiencies that we could gain on the operation side, as well as an opportunity to relieve some of the M&O budget. So we do have some available bond funds that we could use to implement a project such as this at less than $50,000, and then also have that annual savings going forward, even beyond the payback period of almost $12,000. So this was an opportunity that we wanted to bring forward and share this information with you. We'll likely bring this proposal back on May 23rd for board consideration. And again, the funding source we would recommend is basically in order to assist with financial sustainability. If we're able to pay for this out of debt service, it can only help us on the M&O side in terms of savings.
Is the savings and the cost for the 2 campuses combined, or is it per campus?
That's together.
Okay.
Thank you for
That's
asking.
what I thought, but I just wanted to make sure.
Absolutely. So this is something that we could implement this summer if that was something that we wanted to move forward with at the May meeting, so that we could start to achieve those savings in the fall when the students start coming back, is typically when we start to see some issues with power factor. But I'd be happy to answer any other questions you may have.
Time or life cycle of these capacitor banks?
Usually it's about 10 to 15 years. The preventative maintenance is almost nothing. Essentially you go in and you make sure that the capacitor banks haven't swollen or anything like that. Typically, if I've ever had that situation, I've had one or two campuses out of all of them that I've done in the past where it has occurred, and you send those capacitors in and they switch them out for new ones. Some of the banks have filters, so you'll check the filter once a year, make sure it's clean. But other than that, it's pretty much just sits there.
It would yield 6 to 11 years of expected savings beyond the payback period.
That's correct.
Approve this later this month. Are they available that we could get them quickly to make it happen?
Yes, they would be able to install this summer. Mm-hmm.
Or, everything's kind of wonky.
Yeah.
On a boat or something.
Right. Good question. All right. Any other questions?
The GCEC, obviously cooperative campuses don't have the same operating rules and don't have these penalties. Are there savings there as a result of reduced power usage through the implementation of or installation of capacitor banks that would decrease our overall usage? I'm assuming it's probably not enough to overcome the cost in any 7 years or less, but.
Right. So really the installation of the capacitor banks really is negligible on the KWH side. It has a more significant impact on your power factor. So really it wouldn't be very advantageous to us to incur the cost to install it at those campuses.
Functional.
Yes.
That additional penalty. Gotcha. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any potential regulatory changes to think about? I know there's a lot when you're talking about energy that could change from year to year. the only potential negative I can think about would be potential regulatory changes in the future. Is that anything that's been considered?
That's a really good question. Encore has had this tariff in place. I've been doing these projects for 15, 20 years, and they've never removed the power factor penalty from their tariff. I think what's probably more likely to change would be that the cooperatives begin to charge for such a tariff. And they haven't done that. I've kind of watched it for a long time. But at this point, I don't foresee Encore changing that at any time. It's less expensive for them to charge for power factor penalty than to do some of the other efficiencies, you know, from a TDSP side that it will cost them to do.
All right, thank you. Item 10 would be indoor air quality approaches presentation.
This might be my last one tonight. So as we look at summer planning and all the things that we might want to make sure that we're cognizant of and planning for next school year, I want to think we had several discussions earlier in the year about indoor air quality. Of course, at the time we were discussing COVID. And so we were fortunate enough to be invited by one of our board members to speak with an industrial hygienist, which was very enlightening. And we talked about lots of options related to indoor air quality. So we've been looking at this and thinking about it, analyzing it, speaking with different entities. So we just wanted to share with you some information on that. Like I said, we did speak with an industrial hygienist. We've also spoken with an engineering firm. So that's where some of this information is coming from. But really, we wanted to understand what ASHRAE and EPA recommendations are on indoor air quality, what technology options we might have available to us to address indoor air quality, and really what other things we might need to consider to help control the indoor environment. So there are lots of publications and documents out there, and it changes occasionally. So it was a good opportunity to see what the most recent recommendations from EPA were related to IEQ. And then ASHRAE is that, you know, basically the HVAC engineers take that information and put together resources available to building owners to address indoor air quality through a variety of recommendations. So these are their recommendations that to have an action plan to optimize for ventilation, look at filtration and cleaning of the indoor air, and to have an action plan in place with three general approaches. One is source control, so making sure that we keep contaminants out of the building, ventilation, and then also air cleaning of the air that's actually inside the building. So three different approaches. And so it's kind of a multi-tiered approach, and that's really what you kind of get out of this slide, that there's an array of things that really are necessary to achieve indoor air quality. It's not just one item. But we do want to make sure that we're looking at each of the items in this array and we're not disregarding anything. So again, these are kind of some strategies that we can use to limit contaminants into the building to begin with. These are some solutions to look at ventilation. Some of these we already have in place. Some of our areas have demand control ventilation. Some of them we have outdoor air coming into all of our facilities. So then we look at air filtration and cleaning technologies, and that's where really the opportunity would be for Lovejoy to do something additional that we haven't necessarily done district-wide in the past. And there are a number of different technologies related to air filtration and cleaning. And so we provided a lot of information in the slideshow. We may not go through every bullet point, but there are a lot of different things that can be done from different types of filtration. And you'll see the pros and cons of each of those measures listed. But air filtration, we obviously already have air filters in place. They're pretty beneficial. You can do some very expensive replacement filters that might be a higher level. But what we find is typically that it can have a higher cost on your utilities, and also obviously has a higher cost on replacement. Some districts are looking at UVGI. This is kind of a newer technology. Frankly, not very many public buildings use UVGI because you're looking at UV rays, and most people don't want to have those in place in their buildings when people are in their buildings. And we have people in our buildings a lot. So it does become a challenge in a school environment to do UVGI because you've got to implement it when somebody's not there. So you either have to have automation or you have to have staff that can utilize portable equipment. So you'll see some of the kind of pros and cons of UVGI listed there. And so the last option is bipolar ionization. And so this is something that you can install within the HVAC unit. So it's not in the environment. You don't see it. But essentially what it's going to do is help put particulates together so that it can then be filtered through what you already have in place in your HVAC equipment. So it can be fairly low maintenance. We used to have filters for bipolar ionization, but now they actually create devices that continue to function without filtering. The device itself can be cleaned and reused. So again, there's a PCO is probably the last one, the photocatalytic oxidation, that can reduce VOC gases in the air. But again, there's some pros and cons to that as well. So probably the best summary I can provide to you, in addition to hydroxyl air purifiers, which are also pretty rare in the school environment, but we wanted to show you all of the options and pros and cons. This is what I really wanted to get at when we were going through all of this data, all of this information with the engineering firm. Because I said, okay, look, let's just make a chart. What are the pros and cons of all these different options? And if you look across this chart that we devised, you can see that essentially there are things that are, that can remove particulates. There are some things that can be disinfectants, but safety is also an important part. Scalability is also an important consideration. And so as we looked at all these, we also looked at the effectiveness, and then we also looked at cost estimates. And so this is what the engineering firm put together for us on their recommendation. So their recommendation was to do bipolar ionization after they reviewed all the pros and cons of the different options. And so you can see this is their estimate of probable cost. And there's two different ways to do bipolar ionization. Their recommendation essentially was to do a needle point bipolar ionization module that would be installed in the unit. It would function there. So we kind of went through all of the options. This is something that if the district wanted to do something additional to consider to improve indoor air quality for next year, this could be done this summer. It would be something we'd have to move on fairly quickly. But at the end of the day, this was the recommendation of the engineering firm if we wanted to do something additional. As an interesting note, we actually do have a few areas that have bipolar ionization that were installed for indoor air quality in locker rooms because they had a malodor. But I did get a comment back from one of our maintenance guys that said it didn't really work. And I said, oh, how do you know it didn't work? Well, it still smells. So I can't promise that it's going to take all the smells out of a locker room if the sources are still there. But it can be effective in removing contaminants and particulates. So that is just a summary of the assessment that we worked through with the engineering firm after reviewing options for indoor air quality improvements.
Thing that is replacing what we have, or you would say it would be an addition? So would some things go away and some things or would it really just be added to basically everything?
That's a good question. It would be added. We only have a few units at a few select areas and we haven't done anything district-wide. So this would be a BI unit that's installed in the air handler in every unit in the district.
The installation cost, there would still be somewhat of an annual cost to this?
There would not be an annual cost. That's a good question. So the reason they recommended the needle point BI is that we don't have filters in it that we have to replace. It would be something that would continue to function without maintenance required.
Filters that we have for the air conditioning handling units, they would just stay the same the way they are right now.
That's correct.
Install more expensive models or less, or we maybe install less expensive models. I don't know.
Yeah, we would maintain the filters that we have. That's a good question. Some of our larger units have about as efficient of a filter as you can purchase reasonably. So that's why this was the method that they recommended. I do.
The air quality measures that you've been able to, I guess, quantify. How do we go about knowing and quantifying the quality of the outcome?
So there are a couple different manufacturers of these units, and both of them have studied, gone through ANSI ratings and things like that to study the effectiveness of them. So I've used two different ones. They both have proof that it removes particulates in their studies. For indoor air quality monitoring. Excuse me. I promise I'm not doing this on purpose. Some of us have allergies. So, excuse me. Air quality would be important. Indeed. So, we haven't done internal air quality monitoring over a long period of time. So if we wanted to do that, we would have to have an industrial hygienist monitor over time in the same area to see what the effectiveness would be. And frankly, I haven't done that.
Equipment?
I would need to check on that. It's been a while since I've installed them. Usually they're about 10 years.
Well, purchase here is about $340K, give or take, plus or minus.
Would that be bond funds, I'm guessing, or do we have?
That would be my recommendation.
We have adequate capacity in our current issue to be able to make an acquisition of such
We do.
without it affecting other projects that we've already had done.
Yes, we do have availability. And we can bring a summary in May of all the remaining bond availability, but we have several $1 million still available from issued bonds that we could use.
Do we have the debt service capacity to issue those now?
Yes.
Under the cons, it talks about VOCs needing to be monitored. Is that something you've done? You've installed these previously?
No, I haven't done continuous monitoring. That is something we could look at installing or testing in a certain amount of areas.
ASHRAE not taking a position on this particular technology. Is that something that's being evaluated? I guess it sounds like it's a newer technology, but you've used them in the past. I mean, when it says newer, how new are we talking about? And are there any unforeseen?
That's a good question. I get more concerned about some of the technologies that have been around for 2 or 3 years. Bipolar ionization has been in place in schools for probably 7 to 10 years at least. I've never heard of any issues present. So I would be less concerned about that from a, side effect kind of perspective. But I will say that ASHRAE and EPA, frankly, won't take a stand on almost any of these solutions. Essentially because it all comes down to the source and the contaminant and what happens in a particular environment. So really you won't find a lot of, recommendations on specific technologies from them. That's a good question.
Any grants that would be out there that we could potentially apply towards this? Like, hey, we're rewarding you because you're taking air quality serious. Like, y'all been great looking under these rocks, finding money. So I didn't know if this might be an opportunity.
That's a good question. If we were a district that had received a lot of ESSER funding, a lot of districts are using that because it's a COVID response. But we are pretty sure we're going to get all of our ESSER funding back by charging prior expenditures that we've already incurred. So at this point, we don't have that excess in ESSER available to us. We've also maximized our Healthy School Grant already. So there were some, other funds that could be used for this type of activity, but we've already maximized our applications for those funds. Good question.
Hoping because
Right.
y'all been great. You found all this cash. It's awesome.
Standard that schools are looking into some sort of air quality, some solution?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Quick question. So obviously, in the pros and cons slide, we'd want to look at products that are rated ozone free by United Laboratories, because on the con side, I see, may generate some ozone or some VOCs, some volatile organic compounds. Can we distinguish between products that you don't think are going to do that or they're certified to be free of that?
So typically what the engineers would recommend in that case is that you do not install the unit in the space. And so by having it in the air handler of the unit, even if it were to, you know, emit slight VOCs, it's not going directly into the indoor environment. So that's one of the things that it is less visible. So people don't see it. They don't know it's there. They don't know they're benefiting from it. So that could be a, you know, considered a downside, but I think the benefit is that it's not directly in the environment.
And I remember when we discussed this issue related to kind of COVID concerns and air treatment with the industrial hygienist, our concern or her concern at that time was engineers being able to install properly. And so thanks for going out and doing the next step and talking with the engineers, because I know that was a big question mark, is whether our equipment could be installed in our equipment efficiently and effectively versus just thrown on there.
Yeah. And we appreciate the availability to ask the questions from the industrial hygienist. That was a good conversation.
Questions?
Any idea why the two different companies that offer the BIP, one's substantially less than the other? Is that any comment to that?
These are actually two different ways to do BI. We haven't gotten quotes from an actual company. These were estimates that the engineer provided based on past projects that they did. Let me go back to that slide.
Methodology of treatment.
I thought it was actual implementers or bids.
Yeah, you bring up a good point though, in that we have not had actual quotes. We've gotten an opinion of cost.
Estimates from an engineer. Okay.
That's correct. Thank you.
All right. Item 11 is instructional materials selection process, advanced quantitative reasoning, and physical and health education presentation.
What I wanted to do is just to really give an overview of our instructional materials review process and when we are in the year where we are adopting new instructional resources, just to kind of provide the board an overview of what that process looks like. And as you stated, this year we are adopting physical education and health resources, instructional resources, and also the advanced qualitative reasoning resource for one of our math courses at the high school. So just to how the process even begins, the State Board of Education either revises or adopts new Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills in that particular content area or course. And what happens from that point before it even gets to the district level is that publishers are able to provide samples and copies of their instructional materials to be considered to be on the approved adoption list put forth by the state. And we have to ensure, the state has to ensure that at least 50% of the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills are covered within that resource, and 100% of the English language proficiency standards are covered as well. So just to let you know, there is a committee, an instructional material selection committee that we do form for each adoption. And so it could vary on, it's not a standing committee because it really depends on the course and the content. So it's kind of driven, it's really driven by policy and the process that we follow. And then just to give you an example of the timeline. So we're kind of really almost halfway through this timeline right now with our selection of our PE health resources and the math resource. So we start gathering those materials, and that began around February, and that's driven by the curriculum department. We began meeting with teachers in those areas. And because this is a health and PE, we do involve our SHAC committee in that as well too. So they've already met with Mr. Parker, and Mrs. Kranz have pulled together the SHAC when they've reviewed the materials that we're bringing forward. And then we come back to the committees and discuss that where we are moving forward with. And then there's a window of 10 days that we have these resources available for the public to view. So currently, and they're online, but they can come and review those materials. So that's where we are at this time. Then we bring it to you, and our goal is to bring that to the May regular board meeting. And if that's approved, then we go through our EMAT system where we order those materials, and then they're distributed prior to the beginning of the school year. So just that's kind of an overview of what we do each time. Sometimes there are not even instructional materials that are available by the state. But this is a year that we did have those available. Questions? All right. I think I'm next.
Questions? Okay. Item 12.
During the last board meeting, we presented an update on our Lovejoy Child Development Center, and we're really excited about the direction that we're moving, and we have some more information we want to share with you because it's going to be public soon as far as enrolling some of our youngest learners. And I have Erin Perkins, who is our Director of Elementary Education and Early Childhood, and Taylor Dennison, who is Site Director of our Lovejoy Child Development Center. And they're just two incredible leaders that are really going to take this program and move us forward. Just as a review that we are serving currently infant to 4-year-olds, and that is the plan that we will continue for the 22-23 school year. And I talked last time about putting in place the high quality pre-K4 programming, and just to kind of start fresh, and we decided we needed to do some rebranding because we had some different titles and names of some of the programs, and so we wanted to make this clear for our community. So what we are doing for the 22-23 school year is that we're adding the high quality pre-K classes. Right now we're projecting 3 4-year-old classes, and that would enroll students that meet eligibility for pre-K and also tuition-based 4-year-olds. And that will be just like following a regular school day. So a 7:45 to 3 p.m. time for those classes. And in the rebranding that we're doing, we're making it very simple. Pre-K is now a Lovejoy Pre-K, pre-kindergarten, and those are students who are 4 by September 1st. And again, they must meet the eligibility requirements or tuition-based. Lovejoy Child Care will be the ages 18 months to 3 years. Now, I do want to add that we will continue infants through the 22-23 school year, but following that year, we are going to sunset that particular program just because of the cost to the district. And the hours for that will continue to be 7:15 to 6 o'clock. And then our Lovejoy After School program, which was formerly called Kids First, After School Academy, we're going to call it a Lovejoy After School Care. So, and that will be from 3 p.m. to 6, and we will continue the shuttle service. So just to kind of gives you a clean look there, and we're about to launch that on the website, advertising this to our community. We're going to have flyers out on our campuses and on campus websites, and then also you'll see some signs out hopefully as well too. So I'm going to turn it over to Erin, and she's going to talk to you a little bit more about the pre-kindergarten programming and the eligibility process.
Thank you so much for allowing us to share tonight. I'm super excited to be able to partner with Taylor to continue to provide exceptional childcare and early childhood programming to our Lovejoy ISD students. So I think it's so important that we just visit just very quickly why pre-K is such an important part of what we do for our students in Lovejoy. The research is very clear that students who participate in pre-K are more ready for kindergarten. They're more likely to graduate from high school, and it increases their opportunities to be successful in later in life. So by participating in this early intervention, we literally have the opportunity to change the trajectory of a child's life. And that's just incredibly special to be able to have that opportunity to do. And the research also tells us that there are some students who may experience factors in their life that could potentially hinder their success in school. And so through high quality pre-K, we have the opportunity to provide those students with this early intervention for free. And so all of those qualifications are on the screen there. Students who have limited use of the English language because they have another language spoken in their home can participate for free. Students who qualify for free or reduced lunch, who meet the definition of homeless, who may be in foster care or have been in foster care previously. A student whose parent has received the Star of Texas Award, which is an award given to firefighters and peace officers, emergency medical responders that have been injured in their work. And then students whose parents are active duty military or have a parent who may have been injured or deceased in the line of duty. And so again, we have the opportunity to change the trajectory of these children's lives. And so we are just super, super excited about this opportunity. So what does a typical day in pre-K look like? It's a balance of some teacher-directed learning times with some student-directed learning times. Those teacher-directed learning times occur through whole group and small group instruction with a focus on literacy and numeracy skills that they need to be ready for kindergarten. And they'll also be participating in learning centers where those literacy and numeracy skills are reinforced, but also enriched through some thematic connections with their science and social studies guidelines. I think what's so beneficial about the structure of their day is that it allows the opportunity for the teacher to be able to pull some small groups and provide the intervention like we've talked about, but it also allows us the opportunity to enrich and extend learning for students who are ready, because we know we're going to have students who come to us who may have already even mastered what the state tells us a pre-K student should be able to do. So it allows us to provide the intervention piece, but also extend their learning to, again, change the trajectory of their educational path. So what sets us apart from other pre-Ks is the teacher. The teacher in these classrooms will be an early childhood certified teacher with an additional certification in special education. Our teachers in pre-K are also going to get the opportunity to participate in professional learning communities where they will be collaborating together as a team. I'll be able to support their learning along with our curriculum content coordinators are going to be able to support their learning, which is an invaluable piece that some pre-Ks in the community might not have that opportunity. And they'll also be able to participate, our teachers will, in high quality professional development. Anytime there's a PD day built into the calendar for our K through 12 teachers, our pre-K teachers will also be participating in PD on those days. And they'll also this summer be able to participate in learning in Lovejoy. So we're excited to give them some targeted, intentional PD on pre-K during those days. And then all of that together allows them to provide rigorous instruction to their students that's aligned to kindergarten. All right, so enrollment is open. We this week are letting our current families know about the enrollment process. When it comes to pre-K, really our main focus right now is to inform families of those eligibility criteria and help them determine whether their child meets any of those eligibility criteria. And then of course, if they don't, there is an option for tuition-based pre-K. For childcare and after-school care, we are notifying our families this week, and we do have some spots still available, so we'll be filling those hopefully with employee children or community children. So lots of great things coming our way in pre-K. We are super excited, and know Taylor is excited too about all the upcoming changes. I think that is it. Questions? All right. Thank you.
Item 13, consider an act on approval of employment agreements in Chapter 21 employment contract.
Yes, good evening. Yes, tonight I'm here asking for the approval of employment agreements in Chapter 21 contract renewal for the 22-23 school year. I believe we have already supplied a list of employees that are being recommended for this next school year. Any questions for me?
Questions? None.
The
Entertain a
approval list?
motion.
Confirming that this list is in addition to.
Yes, that list is an addition. Yes, we were, many on this list are either part-time or we had people that were just still updating certificates and those types of things. Okay.
So moved. Jeff Wood, second. Marvin Bobo, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Jeff.
Jeff. Second was Marvin. All right.
Lovejoy Scholars. Okay, just going to give you a brief update on Lovejoy Scholars. Right now, we are right in the middle of the application process, review process. We've had, just to start, let's start with here. We started last year, there were 348 accepted scholars that we had talked about. And then as we ended the year, there were 258. So just to bring you back to where we were a couple of months ago. Currently, we have 250 applications. We have 203 renewals, 12 siblings and 35 new students. And that was as of last week. So I was really excited about that. I get calls every day, 4 calls a day, emails. So just still a lot of interest there. So I wanted you to be aware of. And then also wanted to talk to you a little bit about what Dr. Duplessis had shared with you, where we are. It looks like as far as returning scholars, we're about 79%. But if we also look at the siblings, most of those siblings are fairly youngsters, kindergartners coming in. We're about 83%. So I was really excited that we're getting close to that 85% of renewals there. We still are getting renewals in, and so know that those are still occurring there. And then, of course, on the new scholars, the $9,000 for new scholars, we were expecting about 17. And of course, we're about 12.5% with 35 new applications at this time. So about 12.5% there. Okay.
Done to the families that have not expressed interest in renewing yet to understand their
Yes.
situation?
Yes. We have sent emails and made contacts. Some of them were questioning why last year there wasn't a fee and this year there is. And I think that has been part of the discussion there, but we've contacted all the families that were on the list that were renewals. Also, what we have found out once again is some of the renewals, actually they have moved into the district and they're no longer really considered a renewal, and they didn't realize they had not changed their address. So as I reached out to them, I'll get a response back that says, we now live in the district. And so that has occurred also.
Get all past the
Yes.
enrollment period so we can really see.
We can see exactly
what happened.
Yeah, how many were there and how many new ones.
And when is the deadline for enrollment?
I'm sorry.
What's the deadline?
Right now, we're taking applications till May 30th. We have accepted, I believe, 182 already. It's taken a little bit longer because we have a lot of kids many kids that did not test. They didn't take end of course exams, or because they didn't have to last year, or they didn't take STAR testing, those types of things. So it's taken a little bit longer than what we had anticipated. But we're hopefully getting through, because we just got renewals through the 6th. I think the last renewals they're still coming, but the ones through the 6th, and we're reviewing those. Hope to get those parents contacted this week. And then I have meetings this week to set up testing for future applications too. So by the end of May, I think we'll have everyone that's applied notified.
So you expect to have everyone that's applied notified by the end of May?
By the end of May, yes, within the next 2 weeks. Yeah, we're in pretty good shape right now.
And then is that a hard stop, end of May? Or are
I
we
don't
gonna
think so. I
continue?
think
I can't remember.
Well,
what
we said that because we needed really a deadline,
Right,
so we could get them in.
guidance on that. Right.
And also for projections and staffing, so we would know how many teachers we needed. But what I anticipate doing is if we need to keep it open longer, we can continue to advertise. I'll keep you posted exactly where we are there.
I like we're working ahead, so we're not scurrying
Yes.
with the staffing.
Count on that, because we
Correct.
need to know for the
Right.
purposes of staffing, planning, and scheduling.
Right.
So no one needs to count on that.
Correct. So that's why we did basically a firm stop on May 30th.
Perfect.
Okay, welcome.
Great news. All right. Transportation update.
Good evening. If you will remember back at the
believe the workshop in April. I'll just give you an update on where we were for our transportation. I really want to get to this first slide because, well, second slide. We needed a diesel mechanic and somebody was listening to us. I think it was Casey Littlefield because that person is hired. And let me tell you very quick, I'm sorry. Let me tell you a really quick story. So our receptionist at Lovejoy High School, they just moved from California, and little did we know that her husband was a diesel mechanic and was working an overnight shift and was not able to attend their kids' games or be involved in their kids in any way at all. She mentioned that to Casey. Casey said, I think I've got a solution for you because he is here at the board meetings, and made a couple of phone calls. The next day I'm walking the guy around the shop, and he is going to be starting within the next week or two. So he's putting this, I think you could feel the weight lifted off the transportation department. He's going to be an inspector of buses, so we don't have to outsource the inspections. It really has worked out in perfect timing, because once we get into June, there's a lot of maintenance that has to go on in the transportation department that he's going to be able to do in-house that we don't have to outsource. So it really worked out well. Yeah. So thank you, Case. I wanted to just go over some things that we're going to move forward for the 22-23 school year. We are not going to change a whole lot. The fees are going to remain the same. We're not going to increase the fees at all. We're going to offer both AM and PM, and we're all going to offer also an option where they can choose either AM only or PM only. We are going to keep the family cap at $700, but we are going to remove the monthly payment because that requires so much manpower each month. Just it's not really a collection; it's a reminder that we have to send out emails, we have to send out, we have to make phone calls, just to remind them to make their payment. So we're going to remove that, the monthly payment option. And what we'll do is we'll put a deadline in July, at the end of July, that I'll go over in just a second on the timeline to the families who do request bus service for the first semester. They'll have a deadline to make that first payment. The fees, like we said, are going to stay the same. That won't change at all. This is a little bit of a misnomer as far as a shuttle service. We're going to provide a version of the shuttle service, but it's going to be a part of the route. Let me give you an example of how we can do that. In the evenings, which is when most of our current families take advantage of our shuttle service, we can provide rides from, let's say, Sloan Creek that dismisses before the elementary schools. The families who need their child to be picked up at the elementary schools, they can get on the buses that go to the elementary schools after Sloan Creek, and they can get off there. That won't be a shuttle service. It'll just be a bus stop. And so it'll be the same fee as any bus rider would have, but it'll be a bus stop instead of being called a shuttle service. What this is going to do, if you'll remember, is it'll allow us to take 2 bus drivers off of the shuttle routes and put them on community routes. So they're actually running routes, and it'll allow us to better cover the area as far as bus stops. One of the things that I know that we have had that's been very popular is some of our families who used to have students here at Lovejoy Elementary School. We use Lovejoy Elementary as one of our bus stops, or on the shuttle service. We can still make Lovejoy Elementary a bus stop, and so we just won't call it a shuttle service. So same thing for Willow Springs. If we have any students who need to be picked up at the high school, instead of it being a shuttle service, they'll get on at Willow Springs because the buses start at Willow and then they go to the Lovejoy High School. That can be a bus stop for those Willow Springs students. So we'll still be able to provide a version of that service. We're just not going to call it shuttle. It'll just be a bus stop. A timeline, it's a little bit hard to read, but we're going to start sending this communication and our actual plan out by the end of May. We're going to open up registration at the beginning of June for any families that want transportation services for just the fall of, or the entire year, but primarily for the fall of the 22-23 school year. The registration is going to close on July 22nd. What that's going to allow us to do is determine how many routes that we're going to need, go ahead and route students, and get those in place. What we did this year is we kept that registration open all year, and people would sign up throughout the year, and we were shuffling routes throughout the year. That created a lot of confusion because parents would set their after-school activities based on when their child was getting home. And then they may be at the beginning of a bus route, they'd be getting dropped off at 3:15, 3:20. We would shuffle the bus route and they would be moved to the end of the bus route. They may not get home until 3:45, 3:50, and it completely disrupts their after-school activities. So we want to make sure that we refrain from doing any of that. Routes are going to be posted on the website at the beginning of August. So that's going to be a couple of weeks before school begins. And then moving into the fall semester in October, we're going to open up registration for the spring semester again for our existing bus riders from mid-October to mid-November. And then mid-November, we'll open it up for any additional families who may want to sign up for our spring bus routes. So that's kind of the timeline that we have. Like I said, there's not many changes. We're just kind of rerouting, redirecting how families use our bus service. And then of course, removing the shuttle fee and the ability to make monthly payments. We're taking that away. Any questions?
Done. It's good that we're able to keep the fee the same, which the net yield will be substantially less as a result.
I like that there's a plan in place so families can plan accordingly. And I think it's going to be much better for you all as staff. So you're not chasing your tail as the next hurdle comes because there's changes and bumps. And I think this feels a lot smoother. So,
well, and having the routes set and well, having the ability to set routes in mid-July as opposed to the beginning of August, 2 weeks before school starts, that takes a lot of pressure off of our route coordinators. And people still, I mean, they were getting new families each and every day and they're having to shift routes up until the day before school begins in some cases.
It sounds like this timeline's a little bit earlier than previous timelines for deadlines to sign up. I know there was some frustration with some families last year that waited and even missed the longer deadline last year. We're on wait lists for a long time. Are we going to have not just in standard district communication, but more targeted communication to families that have utilized the services? Is that part, just making sure that everybody's not surprised by changing deadlines?
Yes, we will. It'll go out in principal emails. It'll go out and connect with Katie. It'll go out in just standalone emails too. So it's not, I know everybody reads every word of Connect with Katie and every word of the principal emails, but we don't want them to get lost in that. Any other questions?
Questions? Thank you. All right, item 16 would be gym floor presentation.
Wanted to give you an update on some potential repairs that we could do over at Sloan Creek and really at all the gyms. We do not an annual, but a regular maintenance on some of our gym floors. And so we screen and recoat those gym floors, mainly at the high school and the middle school, because those are obviously wood, but there's a lot of use on those as well. And so every few years we screen, which basically we strip the polyurethane off and then we recoat those. And so we're planning on doing those doing that to all of our gyms. But I wanted to share with you some things that we discovered over the past 12 months that we want to make sure and address as well. If you will remember last spring, it'd be the spring of 2021, we had some damages that need to be repaired in the indoor facility. Our weight room, just caused by weather, by lightning and stuff like that. What we had to do in that weight room is we had to remove all of the weights, put them in because we had performance course that we have every summer. We had to move those weights and put them in the Sloan Creek Auxiliary Gym. When we did that, of course, we had to remove the wrestling mats. When we removed the wrestling mats, we discovered that there was termite damage under the wood floor. Well, actually to the wood floor and to the subfloor of Sloan Creek's gym. And so what we are going to have to do now, and when we did that, we didn't repair it immediately. And the reason for that, it was not needed, but well, it was needed, but because performance course was happening, we didn't have the time frame, which was about 6 to 8 weeks, to be able to go in and replace an entire gym floor before the following school year began. So we just didn't have the time. So what we're looking at now is, and you can see some pictures of the damage of the termite damage, and these are different spots throughout the Sloan Creek Sloan Creek floor. What we're looking at is bringing forward at our regular board meeting a cost of repairs to do this, and we're looking at upwards of over $130,000 because you can't go in and spot repair this. You have to completely rip out the wood, replace the subfloor to make sure that it's stable, and then replace the entire wood. Not only that, if you just spot repaired it or spot treated it, the color of the wood's going to be different because of the aging process of the existing wood and then the new wood that came in. So that's it. We could do it. It wouldn't look very good. What we don't want to do is after we put 130,000 plus into this is to potentially put the wrestling mats back down on top of this of these brand new floors. And so what we could potentially do is replace these, and then knowing that what Ms. Halpin shared earlier about the PE floors or about the PE classes and the need for space, this would, if the repairs were approved, we would need to we could potentially move the wrestling program to a different location. Why would we do that? We would need to open up the space for our PE teachers, our PE classes at Sloan Creek Middle School. Right now, we serve 667 students in our PE classes each week, multiple times per week. Right now, that gym is sitting empty for the entire day because wrestling is at the very beginning of the day, at the very end of the day. And so we have an entire day throughout the day that it's not being used. When we do have wrestlers, we have 39 boys right now that are in wrestling and 7 girls. We have 46 kids that gym is sitting empty for the entire day. And so we're leaving it empty for 46 kids, utilizing it for 46 kids when we could actually be utilizing that space to serve 667 kids. And so the question is probably going to arise is what are we going to do with the wrestling program? And the good thing about the situation that we have is, if there is a good thing about closing down a school like Lovejoy Elementary, is we have facilities in place already that we can put a program such as wrestling. For instance, right now in our gym, you can see that we have a gym that we use when we have large meetings, such as financial sustainability. Other than that, we don't use the gym here at the Lovejoy Child Development Center hardly at all. And so other than maybe our Lovejoy Child Development Center students who are over here that may have to come inside on bad weather days, they would utilize the gym. But again, we have space because we have a cafeteria now that is not being utilized, that we don't serve food in, that we can retrofit that cafeteria into a play space for our students here at Lovejoy Child Development Center. We have our students are actually, what benefit is this going to be if we move the wrestling program here? Number one, we don't have a wood floor here. And so if you put the mats down on this type of kind of a sport court or a tile, this is actually tile flooring, any moisture that seeps through the mats after they disinfect them, it's not going to do any damage to the floor. If we put the mats back down on the floor at Willow Springs, we can't guarantee that the same damage is not going to occur again. And the only reason we knew that it did happen in the first place is because we removed them to have performance course in the gym at Sloan Creek. So those are just some of the options that we have. We really do need to repair the floor. Right now, we've treated, I think Dr. Duplessis and her team treated the floors last year as far as making sure that there were no more termites on the floor. And so we were certain that is not the case, but we can't continue to allow that floor to deteriorate because it's not going to get any better. It's only going to get worse. So what our next steps might be is at the May regular board meeting in a couple of weeks, we would include a cost analysis, and then we would also include That cost analysis would include preventive floor maintenance that would be due to be completed at the other gyms. One of the other things that I failed to mention is if we did move the wrestling program over to the Lovejoy Child Development Center, we would have to remove some of the padding, which we already have. It would just take work internally to take the mats and the padding and move them over here to that pad the walls at the gym. We would move those over here as well. So there would be some challenge as far as logistically what we would use. We could use the stage for some weight rooms. We could use some of the classrooms that are here. We could retrofit those for some changing areas. There's a lot of things that we can do here because we have the space. So we would just have to be a little bit creative on how we did that. Any questions?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Item 17 would be our draft 22-23 board meeting calendar.
Yes, thank you. Our board officers had asked that I bring forward a draft of our 22-23 board meetings. You'll notice on this draft that there is no workshop in July, and that's consistent with what we did this year. No workshop in November. We did have a workshop in November this year, but the days off lined up a little bit different. If we were looking at this year's calendar compared to November 22, you would notice that this year we would have had that Monday and that first Monday and Tuesday off. So on this one, it would have been October 31 and November 1st. With those 2 days off a little bit later, you can see there's no ideal fit for a workshop there in November. And then if you look on into December, which we didn't have a workshop this year, you see very limited number of days that month between regular board meetings. And so we're proposing not to have a workshop, but what we would do is, as a cabinet, we would commit to at the regular board meeting prior, if there was anything of substance that we felt like we needed to be proactive with sharing that information, we would just make sure it was at there was a presentation at that regular meeting prior. You'll also notice that there is no board workshop listed in March, and that is consistent. And you can see that's because of spring break there. Another change you'll notice is you had asked for me to bring you a proposal with board workshops during the day and had requested Tuesdays rather than Mondays. So this is here for your review and your discussion.
Questions, folks?
What was some of the thinking behind moving the meeting to Tuesday mornings at 8:30? Or the idea behind looking at that?
Yeah, so there were varying opinions, but certainly reaching a different group of folks, making our presentation timing available to different folks, as well as not cutting into kids' activities in the evenings and availability for people to attend. So since it's a preview of what's coming in the board meeting, in most cases, that information is presented multiple times. So it's an opportunity for other folks to do it, as well as for the staff and the board to be able to free up time in the evenings for them to do things with their families and have it in a normal course of business during the day. Any other things to add to that?
Tuesday, the staff Katie and her team do a lot to prepare. So Tuesday felt kind of nice because they would have Monday where they're able to work and collaborate and get whatever they need to ready instead of Sunday night potentially. And just something different. I mean, it's a lot of meetings and I know the community is great about coming, but it might reach some different folks and a little less stressful than a Monday morning.
I appreciated the consideration. We had originally had Monday morning when the request was made for a day option, but I do really respect and appreciate the consideration for the Tuesday morning because I think that would be much better on staff in regard to preparation because otherwise we'd probably have to have some folks up here on Sunday evening.
And then we thought Monday or Tuesday it needed to give ample time for thought and time before the board meeting. So we wouldn't want it any later in the week.
Good question. Other questions, comments? Okay. Thank you. Any announcements this evening?
Just wanted to share my deep gratitude for our Financial Sustainability Committee. Dr. Duplessis and Ceci Poe did a phenomenal job of all the preparation and planning that went into that. I want to thank Cabinet for their leadership. They just jumped right in on the plan. And then, of course, our phenomenal teachers and staff, parents, community members to dedicate that much time to our school district really is humbling and speaks to their level of investment.
Yep. And the students who were engaged in both that process and the strategic planning process. So, all right, with that, we'll be adjourned. Thank you.